Too often, I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. Again, barefaced lies. Too often, I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. Again.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wanna where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you feel we never wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting overgrown, postal phony, barefaced lies.
Barefaced lies. Barefaced lies.
Hey son, you got a party, you got that little party going on there. Keep to the left, you can't think right, so everything you do goes wrong, yeah. Incompetence just leads to disaster. Corruption brings it on even faster. What you say?
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit and overgrown, postal phony, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit and overgrown, postal phony, barefaced lies.
Barefaced lies. Barefaced lies.
Comrades, you always told us you'd build us all a new Jerusalem, yeah. You talk the talk, but when you walk, you only leave a crooked line there. And you don't see the trouble that's brewing if all you do is just what you're doing.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit overgrown, postal phony, barefaced lies.
Is this where you wanna be? Debt and childhood poverty. Oh, somebody set us free from this corrupt kleptocracy. Oh yeah.
Barefaced lies.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit and overgrown, postal phony, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit and overgrown, postal phony, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit and overgrown, postal phony, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah?
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
Very, very good morning. Very, very good morning. Sunday the 19th of October 2025. My name is Raja Mir. This is an earlier than scheduled Recusant 9 transmission. I'm normally here at 9 o'clock in the evening or thereabouts, 9 minutes past 9. But this time we're here a bit early. And so much has happened over the last week or so. And it culminated in my phone ringing last night, which is why I put out a post on both X and on Facebook. So those of you following me there should hopefully have picked it up, where I said I'll issue something in the morning and I'll come back with a transmission later. I have issued something in the morning. I hope you've managed to read it. And I will like now to go through it in the forensic, detailed manner that I do. My apologies to those of you who want content in short form and all of that. I can't do that. I've tried, I can't do that. It's not me. I'm not a YouTuber, I'm not a Facebooker, I'm not a social media person, I'm a campaigner. I'm an educator, I'm a very serious man who came to this space from an at least equally a serious space. So that's who I am, this is what I do. And I will continue to try and do it for as long as I can. Which takes me to thank you so much, Tony. 100% I am reliant on the goodwill of people to support me, such as Tony and Denise and others. So if you're able to, please at the very least subscribe to the channel. By the end of this morning, perhaps you will have seen, if you're yet to come across me, the value I bring to this space. I recommend you get a coffee, you get a hot drink. I'm going to try and do it in about an hour and a half or so. And we'll see where we get to. I'll keep a look on I'm looking to my left, which is where my computer is. I'll see how many people are continuing to engage with me. Now, I was in Rochdale yesterday. First and foremost, thank you to those of you who came and stood alongside me in Rochdale. Small crowd, as always, these things are small crowd, but I don't worry about that anymore, because in the end, it's only a handful of people. You, me, in the general scheme of things, a handful of us who have got it this far. And it will be a handful of us who get it to the end, because the silent majority are with us. They might not stick their necks out, but they are with us. No one I know will in any way accept what has taken place. And so there's no ambiguity. It is the industrial scale gang rape of this nation's children. Former Prime Minister made reference to the number 100,000. That's not me, that's the former Prime Minister making reference to 100,000 children. We know the figures of the men are in the tens of thousands, if not more. And we also know, because Baroness Casey acknowledged it in her report that forced the government to confirm the national inquiry, that there's an overrepresentation of Pakistani men. Race is a factor, and we need to stop shying away from that. So, that's some of the context. I left Rochdale, went last night to help a friend of mine in a restaurant, where I waited on some tables, cleaned some tables, served some drinks. For my mental health more than anything, if I'm honest with you. It's a very lonely space I occupy in the main, so I go and help my friends when they ask, and of course the return favour is not only will I get a meal at the end of the night, they feed me when I randomly turn up in the restaurant. So that's where I went last night, and my phone started going off. And it started going off with survivors who were contacting me, and campaigners and people who work in government. Raja, they've done this. And what they'd done is they'd made a shortlist. Now, I had a third name as well, actually, which is worse than these two. And they'd made a shortlist. So I put that post out, went to sleep, and my phone was going off all throughout the night. And it was because Sky News had broke the story. So I'll bring up the Sky News story, we'll go through it, and then we'll go through what I want to share with you. So this is Jason Farrell, one of the Sky News home editor, is senior enough there. And leading candidates to chair grooming gangs inquiry revealed. We've both set to face a survivors panel this week. The two prospective candidates are former police officer Jim Gamble and social worker Annie Hudson. A former police officer and social worker are the leading candidates to chair the government's national inquiry into grooming gangs, Sky News has learned. The two prospective candidates, Jim Gamble and Annie Hudson, are due to meet a survivors panel on Tuesday. That group will then pass on the reflections of the candidates to the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, and Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer to decide who leads the inquiry. The Prime Minister launched the inquiry into grooming gangs after an audit by Baroness Louise Casey showed the scale of the problem. Some victims have already expressed concern that the two candidates' backgrounds in policing and social work might lead to conflicts of interest. Might lead. They are exactly the institutions that let us down, said one campaigner. Others want the inquiry to be judge-led, including Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick, who believes the chair should have a deep experience of criminal cases. Remember, this is a national inquiry. This is a national inquiry of a kind this country has never seen before. And the two that they've shortlisted is a former copper and a former social worker. However, and this is where Sky News, and remember, Sky News are part of the establishment. Sky News did not just break this story in the way they did to bring this news to us. They want to set the narrative. They want to set the narrative, and that's why I am here at 9:30 this morning, because I want to try and counter this narrative before they establish it. And what I do, unfortunately, sadly, Charlie Peters, for instance, cannot do. He can't be as aggressive as I am, and you've seen that already, I think, if you follow him on X. However, both candidates have had careers tackling child abuse, and Mr. Gamble has on several occasions challenged police and other institutions over child protection failures. He began his career as a police officer in Northern Ireland, rising to become head of RUC Special Branch in Belfast, but is best known for his work combating child abuse. In 2006, he headed up the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre, which revolutionised the approach to policing online child abuse networks. Its investigations are said to have led to more than 1,000 arrests before Mr. Gamble resigned in 2010 when the Home Secretary, Theresa May, decided to merge his unit with other departments. So 1,000 arrests, and we know arrests does not mean prosecutions. He also headed up Operation OR, the UK's largest ever police investigation into who was viewing internet child abuse images. It identified more than 7,000 suspects and led to more than 2,000 convictions. In 2021, he examined evidence gathered by Sky News into an Asian grooming gang in Humberside. An Asian grooming gang. Was it Chinese? Sky News? And was critical of the police investigation, calling on forces to treat group-based child abuse as seriously as we treat terrorism. Don't worry about any of that yet. He added, this is organised industrial level rape. Telling us something we didn't know, huh? Indeed, Tony, a renowned, revolutionised. In 2022, he led an independent inquiry into the strip search of a black schoolgirl in Hackney, known as Child Q. Oh my God, this is how desperate they're getting. He led an independent inquiry into the strip search of a black schoolgirl in Hackney, known as Child Q, concluding that racism was a factor. Yes, it's easy to conclude racism is a factor when the victims are black. That's nothing revolutionary, is it? Including adultification bias, in which adults perceived black children as being older than they are because they see them as more streetwise. The rival candidate, Annie Hudson, was appointed as chair of the Child Safeguarding Practice Review Panel in December 2020. Before that, she was Director of Children's Services at the London Borough of Lambeth. Remember, no grooming gangs in Lambeth. Having held the same role at Bristol City Council. Hudson was also previously Chief Executive of the College of Social Work. Remember, the College of Social Work is neck deep in this cover-up. What have they said about this? Nothing. Have they come out and condemned any of this? I don't remember it. I don't see it. In 2012, she was given a National Social Worker of the Year award for her outstanding contribution to social work. She is also the lead trustee for safeguarding at Oxfam. Political heat has been ramped up on the government to show progress with the inquiry. Last week, a motion in Parliament expressed deep concern that 4 months on from the announcement of the inquiry, no chair has been appointed, no terms of reference have been published, and no hearings and local investigations have begun. Of course, they omit Rupert Lowe's name from who submitted the motion, but this is Sky News. The establishment's partner, a Home Office spokesperson, they're always unnamed. The abuse of children by grooming gangs is one of the most horrific crimes imaginable, so horrific that we helped cover it up for decades, as confirmed by Dominic Cummings. We'll forget that bit, shall we? We'll do everything in our power to ensure the cover-up continues. We'll do everything in our power to ensure these crimes never happen again. We are working urgently to appoint the best chair to take forward this work, to get to the truth and deliver justice to the survivors. It would be wrong to provide a running commentary on that process whilst it is still underway. So this is as good a PR piece as I've ever seen from, this time, Sky News and Jason Farrell. And this is the man, I think we'll get it. It'll be Mr. Gamble, I believe, will be the one. Now, I am going to systematically dismantle everything that has took place so far, including how we got here, what this here actually is, and where we go next. I started this at 4 in the morning. It's a bit rough and ready, and I will talk through it. I will stop at every section once I get, there are 5 sort of sections I've split this into. I'll stop at every section. I urge people to listen I'm not here to promote reform, advance, conservative, or anything like that. You want conversations like that, or you want to rant about other things, please. Not here and not today. This is actually now very, very serious. Thank you to those of you who have been supporting me. And I will say this just before I start. If you can, please do sign up to Red Wall and the Rabble. The more detailed analysis content will go out via the newsletter there. I can't put it up anywhere else because there's just too many words. And I will say this as we start. Our numbers remain extremely low for the impact we need to have. And I don't know what to say or do about that. So what we've got is no judges. You can believe this is independence if you want, but I reckon no independence. And I want to share with you the truth about the grooming gang inquiry shortlist of 2. We didn't get here because the government or the Home Office wanted us here. There's been a long and arduous road travelled before we got to where we now are. Started long before I came along, and I recognise people's names because I think it's important to recognise people's names. The likes of Maggie Oliver, doing it long before I came along. And of course, whether you like him or not, you've got to acknowledge the role Tommy Robinson played in raising awareness on this. Then there's the likes of Andrew Norfolk, pioneering journalist, and more recently Charlie Peters. If not for these people, this would just have been buried. The politicians who have joined, in the main, have joined late, with the good wind behind them and the heavy lifting already done. The Conservatives, with the exception of 1 or 2, I have very little respect for because they knew about this for 14 years. I shared a piece of work yesterday, I think, that detailed why the Conservatives covered it up, different to why Labour covered it up. And indeed, Warren, when we got to a more local space, the likes of, without Warren Bates, none of this would have happened. And without the likes of George Hayward, who also passed not so long ago, whose kindness in helping me keep my lights on kept me going when I was on the verge of, I don't know. So, there's so many people who are responsible for helping us get here. And the landmark national inquiry, the road to the landmark national inquiry, was carved through years of political denial, bureaucratic hesitation, and rising political anger. Each stage of this journey, from ministerial letters, parliamentary votes, council votes, coroners' inquests, criminal convictions, each stage reveals how successive governments had promised moral clarity and became trapped. Trapped in what? A multicultural experiment, denial? I'll let you decide. The story for us started with the Oldham rejection, and many of you joined around about here. What happened is, after 7 years of campaigning, we've managed to force our council to write to the government for a statutory inquiry. In October 2024, the Minister for Safeguarding, Jess Phillips, Minister for Safeguarding Girls, Jess Phillips, sent a formal letter to Oldham Council rejecting calls for a statutory inquiry into historic grooming gang failures. And I'll quote her. "I believe it is for Oldham Council alone to decide to commission an inquiry into child sexual exploitation locally rather than the government to intervene. Those are her words. For survivors and campaigners, that response felt like abdication. After years of cover-up, the minister responsible for safeguarding little girls who'd built a career on of championing the need to safeguard women and girls, had delegated accountability back to the very authority accused of the concealment in the first place. She did that knowingly, she did that willingly. And I will despise that woman to my last breath. We'd lost. And as a last reflection on the year that was passing on the 1st of January, New Year's Day, I was sat in my living room just 2 yards away from where I am now. I shared Jess Phillips's rejection letter online on X, and it triggered an international storm because Elon Musk shared it, the content, to his global audience. And the story escaped Westminster control. It escaped the establishment control, as I've demonstrated with the likes of Sky News, the BBC. The government's attempt to contain a local scandal had become a national reckoning and an international shame. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, tried to stem the fallout. Rather than supporting a single statutory inquiry, she proposed a network of independent local reviews, 5 I think she mentioned, under the existing safeguarding framework. She wanted £2 million or something for them, which meant they was never going to work. Reviews without legal powers of compulsion. The idea was presented as flexible and community focused. But government insiders themselves later admitted it was designed to avoid a judge-led process that could force ministers or senior officials to give testimony, go after the evidence, wherever it was, and deliver justice. Within weeks, survivor advocates, even MPs, were calling the proposal localised, limited, safe, another cover-up. Refusing a national inquiry, even to the most fervent Labour Party supporters, just didn't make sense. The Prime Minister got involved. As pressure mounted, he intervened directly. During Commons questions, he warned against jumping on a far-right bandwagon. In fact, he was at an NHS event, wasn't he? Where he stood on a platform that had nothing to do with this matter and talked about jumping on a far-right bandwagon. He added fuel to the fire, and his phrase ignited further fury among survivors and cross-party MPs alike. Editorials from The Times and The Guardian condemned the language as dismissive of genuine community concerns. For many observers, it crystallised a sense that Labour's leadership was paralysed by fear of the politics around race and class rather than motivated by justice. And of course, by this point, we had been hammering away, naming Labour Party politicians, senior Labour Party politicians involved in the cover-up. So much so that even The Spectator magazine published a headline, I think it was Labour's Dirty Men or Labour's Guilty Men, and named an MP, Sean Davis, I think, from Telford. So all of that took place. In March, the Conservative MPs tabled an amendment to the Criminal Justice Bill calling for an independent statutory national inquiry into group-based child sexual exploitation. The Labour government voted against it. The optics didn't go well for the Labour Party. The Telegraph wrote that Labour had handed the Conservatives the moral high ground on child protection. Remember, this is the Conservative Party that for 14 years had ignored us. The Guardian reported that several Labour MPs were privately uneasy, whilst I think it was the Times quoted one MP saying that they were deeply uncomfortable and that the vote made the party appear frightened of the subject. Within hours, survivors and whistleblowers flooded social media under the hashtags that they use and posted screenshots of those who had voted against. The vote confirmed public suspicion that ministers would resist transparency and that they would have to be forced. Yvette Cooper tried to reinvent what had happened and claimed that a national inquiry was already being considered, and she tasked Dame Louise Casey for a rapid audit. It made no difference. The government looked defensive rather than decisive. Casey's audit, when it came, and remember it came late, this is June, fast forward all the way to June, she published a national audit. It was called the Group-Based Child Sex Exploitation and Abuse, a document that would compel the government into its U-turn. Casey found that data and grooming gang offending was incomplete and unreliable. The police just weren't monitoring it, with ethnicity and nationality missing for 2/3 of recorded perpetrators. 2/3 of recorded perpetrators. The ethnicity information had not been recorded. I still can't fathom that. She concluded that the authorities had shied away from analysing those details because of political fear and described Britain as being in a state of collective denial. She also specifically made reference to Pakistani heritage men. She opened Pandora's box. There was no going back. She made 12 recommendations. I've written something on it. I'll share it separately, including mandatory recording of offender ethnicity, improving data sharing, stronger legal definitions, and of course, a full statutory national inquiry. Within days, Yvette Cooper accepted all of the recommendations. But ministers were still reluctant to launch a national inquiry. When Starmer announced that decision, he was on a plane somewhere else, remember? His language was procedural rather than pertinent. It sounded less like leadership and more like capitulation to It was inevitable, wasn't it? We knew what was coming. He'd capitulated to a process, and the cover-up was about to start. Those of us who celebrated, including myself, we knew what that celebration was really about. We had forced them to a space they didn't want to go, but that the fight was far from over. Meanwhile, whilst Whitehall was arguing about terms of reference, chairs, all of that sort of stuff, the courts kept delivering their own verdicts. Rochdale, another rape gang, 35 years for the ringleader. Bradford, another rape gang where one of the ringleaders married his grooming victim, facilitated by the social worker, and then the council put the child in the care of his parents and paid them, from where he continued to rape her. Every case that was emerging was horrific and worse than what had come before. And then you had the likes of Katie Lamb standing up in Parliament and reading court transcripts, including the phrase, you'll have to excuse me, fuck all the white girls and fuck the government. Remember, this government wanted to shy away and has continued to shy away from how these were racially motivated crimes, religiously justified. Most recently, the coroner's report into Charlotte Tetley's death-suicide cited systematic failings of post-abuse support. The inquest conclusion, inadequate safeguarding and mental health provision. She'd been forced to flee the town that was her home and all of her support networks in Rochdale to Macclesfield because her abuser had been allowed to come back to the town, or one of her abusers. The judge in the recent Rochdale case with Bossman, remember one of them was from Oldham, fled the country. No doubt back in Pakistan, tending to his goats. The judge made specific reference to how it was inconceivable that the wider community didn't know. This is endemic, this is systematic, and these men were protected. Public patience snapped. We went from being conspiracy theorists or far-right activists, and then the truth was right in front of all of you. Public patience snapped. Each new conviction, each sham inquiry, assurance review, each funeral, each scream by another survivor, each testimony more harrowing than the last, reinforced the same truth. The system had not only failed once, it was still failing. By autumn 2025, so September, Jess Phillips was facing weekly questioning in Parliament, and she wasn't doing well, was she? Even loyal Labour MPs were calling the delays untenable. Casey's audit had set the moral benchmark, and the ongoing prosecutions ensured the issue could not face the would-be deputy leader of the Labour Party. Only last week, Lucy Powell confirmed the cover-up, the political cover-up. The government's national inquiry was just delayed and delayed and delayed. Wrangled over remit is what The Guardian reported. The inability to find a credible chair. And this is where last night and this part of the story begins. When The Guardian, I'll bring up the article so you see it. When The Guardian published this article, National Grooming Gang Inquiry stalls over remit wrangles and lack of chair. Exclusive sources say senior legal figures appear reluctant to head investigation launched by Keir Starmer in June. What that actually means, translated, is that the judges have said no. The ones who should be leading this inquiry have said no, and if you follow all of the government documents, the only reason they can have said no is 1, the history of ICSA, and 7 years, 8 years, 3, 4 chairs, and the government did not implement any of the recommendations, regardless of what Jess Phillips and the others have said. I've sat next to a senior advisor from ICSA a couple of weeks ago. The poor lady was distraught. I could see she was haunted. She'd given up 8 years, 9 years of her life. Not a single recommendation from ICSA had been implemented. One of them, to do with compensation for survivors, the government had quietly shelved or excluded grooming gang survivors because there was too many of them and it would cost too much. The judges said no. Also, because the terms of reference had already been drafted. Not my words, Jess Phillips's words, I think, give or take. That shouldn't have happened. So they're saying, no, we're not going to front this inquiry according to your rules with everything else that's going on. Because if we front your inquiry according to these rules with everything else that's going on, our reputation will be destroyed. The nation will come after us. And we will go after them if they did that. So they needed to go and find stooges elsewhere. And that's where these two come in. When the government finally announced what it called a landmark statutory inquiry, it promised justice at scale. That's what it means, national statutory inquiry. It's justice at scale. The chance to uncover 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades of systematic failure and political cowardice. Ministers spoke of transparency. Survivors dared to hope for truth. Within months, that hope had collapsed. The inquiry has not yet taken evidence, has not appointed a chair, not defined its scope. It is already paralysed. At best, it is a broken start. You've seen the Guardian report, stalled over remit wrangles and the lack of a chair. Behind that neutral phrasing was a deeper crisis. Whitehall could not agree to the terms of reference, and no senior figure was willing to lead it. Judges, King's Counsel, former regulators were sounded out in private. They would have to have been. Each one of them must have declined, but because each one of them, on papers, on their CVs, these two that they're shortlisted are like apprentices compared to what should have been needed. The task was clearly impossible, too political to be independent, too limited to be effective. When I spoke to someone, what was it? The remit looks designed to control the fallout, not to uncover the truth. So barrister, I remember having a conversation with Raja. The remit looks like to limit the fallout, control the fallout, not to uncover the truth. The refusal of the judges, the King's Counsel, barristers, is unprecedented. Statutory inquiries derive their authority from the credibility of the chair. When the judiciary and legal establishment refuse even to consider the role, it is not the inquiry that lacks credibility, it is the government behind it. So this is a stillborn inquiry. The remit is disputed, the legal powers undefined, leadership is vacant, and survivors saw a pattern they already knew by heart. Bold words at the announcement, bureaucratic inertia afterwards. Before it had even begun, Britain's new national inquiry into the rape gangs looked less like a reckoning than a holding operation, an attempt to manage outrage rather than confront the truth. I'm asked, why do I think no judge would touch it? You have to understand inside the Home Office, this fight has been about scope. Should the inquiry focus narrowly on street-based grooming gangs, which is cowardice in its terminology, what it actually means is Pakistani rape gangs, or should it extend to the wider landscape of child sexual exploitation? The distinction is everything. A narrow remit would keep the focus on local policing. A broader one would expose the political decisions, immigration policy and community relation strategies that has shaped institutional responses for 20 years. For senior judges, it was a trap. They had watched the ICSA inquiry collapse under its own weight. 7 years, 200 million, thousands of witnesses, and a final report named no one and held nobody to account. The recommendations had even been ignored. To preside over another politically loaded process without guarantees of independence was a reputational risk no one was willing to take. Who would want to be the next scapegoat when this falls apart? The legal establishment, in short, saw what survivors feared: an inquiry designed to look thorough but deliver nothing. Robert Jenrick, Shadow Justice Secretary, told GB News, the inquiry must be led by a senior judge with deep experience of criminal cases. Anything less, he warned, would risk signalling that the government isn't serious about justice for victims. He went further, suggesting the government approach retired judges from other common law jurisdictions. I think Mary put it up here. Sorry, Mary, I'm going to put your comment on. From Australia, Canada, if no one in the UK would take the job. It was an extraordinary statement from the Shadow Justice Secretary, effectively accusing the government of sabotaging its own inquiry before it began. Jenrick's message resonated because it exposed a visible truth. A statutory inquiry without judicial leadership cannot command public trust. A statutory inquiry without judicial leadership cannot command public trust. So what we have here is a shortlist of last resort. Don't worry, CJ, there is no way I trust Jim Gamble. Either of you. You need to understand. I've seen this all before. By mid-October, Sky News, so this was last night, revealed that the Home Office had narrowed down its search to 2 names. Jim Gamble, former police officer and head of Child Exploitation Online Protection Centre in the past. Yeah, they hold that up. Yeah, see up. And Amanda Hudson, a career social worker executive, current chair of the National Child Safeguarding Practice Review Panel. Sky News framed the shortlist as progress. Its headline: leadership candidates to chair grooming gang inquiry revealed, implying momentum where there was actually paralysis. The tone was of optimism. Yeah, Gamble was described as a pioneering figure in child protection. Hudson as a respected leader with deep experience of safeguarding systems. If you knew no better, and sadly the vast majority of the country do not know better, it looks like the government had found its solution. The coverage leaned heavily on phrases such as frontline experience, sensitive brief, suggesting professional competence rather than confronting the issue of independence. It missed entirely the obvious question: why had no senior judge agreed to take the role? I am clear in my position. Both of these candidates are insiders, the products of the very bureaucracies under examination. Neither has judicial experience. Neither has led a statutory inquiry with powers to compel evidence. I don't think either have ever been part of any form of statutory inquiry. Both come from within the system that failed victims. The government calls it a shortlist. In reality, it is a demonstration of a wider rejection. The most serious investigation of its kind, a generation the most serious investigation of its kind in a generation, at least my lifetime, your lifetime, I think, has become an exercise in finding anyone willing to say yes. Government that had promised to hold institutions to account was now turning to those same institutions to investigate themselves. Yes, investigating themselves. So, let me look and critique both of them for you. Jim Gamble, I describe him as the insider in uniform. Sorry, Cheshire Cat, Rupert Lowe isn't capable of chairing it. He's a politician. He's a businessman. We need someone with judicial experience, expertise to chair this. Sorry, I'm just looking at the comments and stuff, so I'm just going to, before we move on, I'm going to close. I think Rom Fan is a bit too excited for me, so I've just she's a politician. She might be something else before she's a politician. You need a judge. Let's look at Jim Gamble. His background, his career, was built inside policing. Royal Ulster Constabulary, Special Branch, the National Crime Squad, CEOP. He remains closely tied to senior policing circles and the government's own safeguarding boards. A national inquiry into policing failings, which this must cover, a national inquiry into policing failings, cannot credibly be led by a lifelong police officer. His loyalties and professionalism lens remain those of the institution under scrutiny. So he doesn't have the independence, nor does he have the experience. Operational command is not judicial oversight. They are not one and the same. Gamble has never chaired a statutory inquiry. He has no experience of statutory inquiries. He's never issued subpoenas. He's never, he's not done any of that. He's never waded through thousands of pages of documents, led a national team, a compelling disclosure. None of that. His work at CEOP centred on prevention campaigns and digital policing not adversarial accountability. He does not have the experience. As for his competency, I am sure he is an able administrator. I'm sure he's an outstanding police officer. If you believe that, that's fine. But inquiry leadership demands legal rigour, and dare I say it, moral courage, independent of the organisation you're investigating. I would say his instinct is to contextualise rather than to expose. Sky News wants to present him as a frontline expert. The likely outcome is clear. Gamble would deliver a policing narrative, tragic mistakes, resource shortages, cultural sensitivities, ending with procedural recommendations. It would sound constraints and leave the core failures untouched. This man cannot be put in charge. Then you have Annie Hudson, the bureaucrat of safeguarding. She's built her career in local councils, serving as Director of Children's Services in Lambeth and Bristol, before becoming Chair of the National Child Safeguarding Practice Review Panel. Lambeth was later condemned by ICSA for decades of institutional abuse. Go and check that. Go and check the history of safeguarding children in Lambeth. Hudson is part of the same safeguarding establishment now under investigation. An inquiry led by her would appear as social work auditing itself. She got a social work award. She's part of the social work establishment. We know what social workers did. They stood and watched. Ooh, I might be called racist. No. Her reviews will be polished lessons learned, documents, little personal accountability, no major disciplinary or criminal referrals will follow her findings. Too nicey nice. You'll see reflective practice, multi-agency learning, professional development. It's managerial culture. It's not a judicial inquiry. She is a safe pair of hands. Who is she a safe pair of hands for? Can you see the pattern emerging? Both candidates come from within the bureaucratic architecture that failed the victims. Neither possess judicial authority. Both speak the language of policy rather than justice. Their shortlisting reveals a government looking inwards, not outwards, a state investigating itself with its own officers and administrators. The promise of a reckoning has already given way to the choreography of self-protection. And it's wrong. And it's wrong for so many reasons, including what Louise Casey said. When the government could no longer defend the paralysis surrounding the inquiry, it turned to the one figure whose integrity had already forced its hand, Dame Louise Casey. Remember? She produced this national audit on group-based child sexual exploitation, published it on the 16th of June. It led to the national inquiry. Casey's audit, to her credit, was the most forensic piece of work that has come out during this process from government. It examined data from forces across England and Wales and concluded that the national record of group-based child sexual exploitation was incomplete and unreliable. 2/3 of cases lacked even basic information, such as offenders' ethnicity or nationality. She wrote that authorities are shied away from those details for fear of being accused of prejudice, describing a culture of denial that still persists. She identified clear demographic patterns in several regional forces and warned that political sensitivity had prevented honest analysis. Her message was unambiguous. The government could not fix what it refused to name. And she named the Pakistani men. "12 recommendations, including a national statutory inquiry. Yvette Cooper announced they'd support it, but Casey herself warned Parliament that acceptance on paper was meaningless without courage in practice. She cautioned against another learning exercise that gathered dust. Casey's work defined what a genuine inquiry must be. Forensic, fearless, and unwilling to translate moral failure into managerial language. It must identify who knew, what they did, and what consequences followed. It must pierce the bureaucratic comfort zone of lessons learned. It must speak plainly about culture, cowardice, and institutional fear and failure. And it must name names. Her Rotherham inquiry had somewhat set the ground, displayed that courage. She described collective blindness, I think it was her phrase, and misplaced political correctness. And very recently, she warned us all, unless Britain faced uncomfortable facts, the abuse would continue. Her audit set a moral benchmark, and a benchmark that deserves a chair with independence, legal authority, competency, as well as the will to challenge the state itself. And that is why these shortlisted candidates fall short. Do you believe that either of them, forget the independence, forget the legal authority, do you believe either of them have the will to challenge the state itself? Measured against Casey's standards, the two proposed chairs are fundamentally, politely miscast. Gamble, Casey's audit, insisted the next phase must examine institutional complicity within policing. Gamble is policing. His career and loyalties lie inside the institution under scrutiny. Whatever his intentions, he cannot embody the independence Casey knows we need. We've seen what's happening with the Independent Office for Police Conduct, IOPC, in Rotherham, neck deep in the cover-up of protecting police officers who are gang-raping girls in the backs of police cars. Gamble is from that world. And irrespective of the PR spin. He has never shown the willingness to speak out against the Pakistani rape gangs and condemn the politicians and the cover-up or the police officers involved. His instinct is operational explanation. His track record is not moral confrontation. Because that's what we need here, moral confrontation. Annie Hudson, well, Casey was equally direct about failures in children's services in 2015 and in 2025. She found social work management culture had become defensive, bureaucratic and fearful. Hudson's career was built inside that same culture. She was awarded by that culture. Departments, the kind of departments she once led, are the ones who have been criticised for systemic failings. When it's a systemic failing, it means it's happening everywhere. Or did it not happen in Bristol or Lambeth? Hudson neither has the courage nor the conviction to take this where it needs to go. Can any of you imagine Hudson standing up, Miss Social Worker of the Year, and saying these were racially motivated crimes, religiously justified? They targeted these girls because they were white. They gang raped them because of their cultural norms. No chance. No chance whatsoever. Neither candidate matches Casey's description of what is required. Her audit was meant to raise the bar of accountability. By selecting insiders from policing and social work management, the government is instead lowering it. The danger is more than incompetence, it is perception. Perception. To survivors, appointing insiders signals that nothing has changed. It risks turning Casey's audit, a document that broke the national silence, into the prelude to another managed review. A chair without a judicial power, or moral distance, yeah, that's the phrase, moral distance, cannot compel disclosure from those same networks that withheld evidence for years. Without that power, the inquiry will reproduce exactly what Casey warned against, which is another exercise in lesson learning bureaucracy. Casey handed the government a narrow window to prove Britain had learned from its own failures. Her audit was a moral summons. It wasn't a consultation. She had taken the most politically charged issue in modern Britain and forced ministers to confront it in daylight. My friends, that daylight is fading fast. If the government now proceeds with a chair who lacks independence, the result will not merely be another failed inquiry, it will be the final collapse of public confidence that the British state can ever investigate itself. Every survivor who testifies will wonder whether their evidence is being managed rather than heard. Every redacted document will confirm suspicion. Every press conference will echo with the same question: what are they hiding this time? Casey's reference to Pakistani men shattered a decade of euphemism. To dilute it now, by giving control back to the bureaucracy she said had shied away from the truth, would be an act of political self-sabotage or political self-protection. You decide which term suits you best. The damage would stretch far beyond this issue. It would tell the public that when confronted with the hardest questions of power and accountability, modern Britain still cannot look itself in the mirror. It would confirm the inquiry exists not to expose the state, but to protect it and to protect the politicians neck deep in the cover-up. That made me laugh. The government promised a national inquiry, a landmark inquiry even, would instead deliver a case study in institutional self-preservation. The victims would remain nameless, the officials unexamined, the culture unchanged, and the guilty left free to continue as they were. Casey's standard was simple. Tell the truth, whoever it offends. To ignore that principle now would betray her work and extinguish faith that truth-telling is still possible inside British public life. And once that faith is gone, once you and I cease believing that even a statutory inquiry can produce honesty, the state loses more than credibility. It loses legitimacy. No, Adrian, it's not. The only hope we have at this moment is to challenge what this government are doing. I've set the scene for you. I'll come back more, hopefully, this evening. I'll take some questions now. There's a lot to digest. I think I wanted to share with you why these two people are the wrong candidates and how we got to the wrong candidates. So I'm here, ask away. Just over 1,400 of you joined in this morning whilst I'm here. Again, my work is 100% community funded. Please consider subscribing, supporting me. Subscribe to Red Walnut Rabble. It costs you nothing. It costs you absolutely nothing. I've got one person who've subscribed today. I'll do what next? I hope this evening, Louise, depending on how this morning's broadcast goes down. But I've got a very, very clear set of actions that can be taken immediately from MPs all the way down to people. So I can do that. That was very, very straightforward. I don't think it's fair you pick on Sabana Mahmood, Ian. Can any of them be trusted to oversee this? Can any of them be trusted to oversee this? I think we are coming to the end of our journey in terms of a chapter of our journey, Denise. We've got to the end, coming to the end of October. I've been doing this every day now, non-stop since January the 1st. And we're absolutely nowhere in terms of the numbers we need and the informed public we need, I'm afraid. So I'm not sure what our next steps will be. You can see what they're doing. Thank you, Steve. Yes, you can become a member on YouTube as well. Thank you so much. I don't think they care, Sin. They don't care because no one holds them to account. And I'll share with you this evening what the opposition ministers should be saying or doing, and which is why I did this morning. So let's see what comes out during the day. Thank you for that. Makes a massive difference, and I'm not sure I put everyone up. And Sheila gave me £5 as well, so thank you as well, Sheila. Someone sent me a link a couple of days ago, and someone had just made reference to the grooming gangs in a very superficial way, and I think it was like 200, 300,000 views of it or something. I'm just, I can't compete with any of that. And we just haven't got the numbers. We're trying, and we just haven't got the numbers. And remember, I'm not 1 year into this, I'm 7 years into this. I went to the demonstration in Rochdale, and I said thank you to everyone who attended, and I was as positive as I could be. And Nick Buckley came, and I went for a coffee with him in the Weatherspoons afterwards. I think there was about 50 people at the demonstration, maybe 60 at a push. There were at least 300 people in the Weatherspoons. Thank you. Thank you so much, Roy. Makes a difference. Yeah, I don't know what to say, Gillian. I think the numbers are clearly there. Yep. And clearly I'm not doing something right. But if you've got any questions about what I've gone through about the CVs of these two people, or how we've got to them being on the shortlist, please put them up. Thank you, Dorothy. I remember Dorothy came up with a banner and also spoke as a whistleblower. Yeah, it's disappointing, isn't it, Steve? So the government are trying to rig the national inquiry by putting shortlist of two for the chair. Both are insiders, one from the police, one from a social work profession, both never having operated at that level before either. So it's not just their independence, it's also their experience. And are we to believe that they will do what's needed? No. Thank you for that. I think most people have been dumbed down. Dumbed down, I think he meant dumbed down, yeah. Most people have been dumbed down. And that's how we've got into this mess. It's how we've got into this mess. Okay. I think we're at the end. I've got another piece of work to do. I'll bring it up. I'll try and do it tonight, and I'll see how this morning goes and how well this video that I put out just now the stream I put out, how well that goes, and I'll see what my mood's like, and and whether I can put something else out this evening about 9 o'clock. Please watch the news. Please listen to how this story is presented and decide for yourselves.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011 he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.